And we're live. How's it going, everyone? Here to answer your questions. Let's see if my little test project that allows me to answer these questions better is working today. Any questions you have, whether it's related to building web applications or freelancing or what's going on, let me know. I would love to answer those questions. We've been getting a lot of really good discussions doing this, which I'm like stoked on. I need to solve my webcam, or actually it's a DSLR camera for these live streams. I need to get a better one that's not always auto-focusing like that. It's got this like weird jump, and it's certainly something I need to solve. So let me know if you know of any that are really good, because I would definitely love to check it out. Because I'm really enjoying doing these live streams, but I want to make them better for all of you, because that's going to be better for all of us then, right? Okay, so first question or first comment. Hey, how's it going? Good to have you out here. Thanks for saying hello. Hello, what's up? Next up, Raju, hey. Sandeep. I think we've talked a few times now, Sandeep. Thanks for coming out again. First question, here we go. What do I start with, Angular or React? Well, do you know JavaScript? If the answer is yes, I really like React.js, because you can just very incrementally build your skills using it. Because you can just do very minor things, which I think is really cool. All right, it's 12:10 in India, so right early morning tomorrow, right? Thanks for coming out. I wanted to come on a little bit earlier, but you know, just had a nice early morning with the family, and now I'm coming on now. So thanks for being here and hanging out that late at night. Programming Life, hey, what's up? Welcome back. Hey, how's it going? I do not know how. Hushan? Is the B silent? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Sorry if I'm not. Why are we using channel in Django? So Django channels 2. Well, Django channels 2 allows you to use WebSockets in Django. That's just a really easy way to use WebSockets in Django. It's not natively built into Django yet, but hopefully in the near future it will. If you're not familiar with WebSockets, take a look at my day, I think 28 or 29, in 30 days of Python to see how WebSockets work, at least in Python. Vincent, thank you. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I put a lot of effort in these things, you know? Hopefully you guys, well, I would imagine you see that. You know, sometimes I don't perform as well as I'd like, but the show must go on. I just keep going and making new stuff. And it's great to hear that some of you guys are liking it. Thanks so much. John, hey, thanks for the comment. I'm glad you enjoy the content. I do not have a computer science degree. I started learning how to do web development out of my own deep desire to do so. And honestly, just picking up books or watching courses, but really just building projects is how you can learn everything that you might need to learn. And if there's any gaps in my knowledge related to computer science or programming, I do those same things, right? So luckily, MIT and Stanford and all of these major universities that have great computer science programs, they put all of their stuff on there too. So the degree itself is just like signifying that you went there and did all their tests. For me, I put in the work to signify that I know what I'm talking about, right? So I think it's quite a bit different than just going through and getting a degree. You know, to me also, I have a business degree, so business administration, and there were people that got that degree that will never really excel in business. Like they want to do many other things, and that's completely okay. They'll excel in other areas of life, and I think that's important in computer science too. There's people that just get the degree and never really fully master or use it. So I don't think a degree is always the greatest indicator of somebody's skill in any given area. Elon Musk is really famous for this. He doesn't care if you have a degree, just come and work there. If you know engineering, you know engineering. These are like principles that you can learn and master regardless of formal education. And I did it out of my own deep desire to do so. But thanks for asking, John. Appreciate it. Let's see. Can I upload a full Django course from basics? I have a number of them. Check out the Try Django series. That is meant to be from basics. I think even Try Django 1.8 till today, all of that is still Django. So Django has evolved for sure, but Django is Django. So the core concepts are still the same. Hey, how's it going? That's definitely a little glitch I need to solve. Like when I switch to the next message, you know, like it actually just jumps off. And if you need your questions answered faster, you know, just hit me up on a super chat. That's definitely the easiest way to do it. And it supports the channel a lot, you know. And if you spam the channel, I'm not going to respond to your questions. I just got the same question 1,000 times. I'm not responding to those things. No surprising. Anyways, okay. So next question: can I do an atomic transaction tutorial? Like allow one user to buy a ticket from a limited pool of tickets. Thanks for the suggestion. That is probably a good idea of something that should be covered at some point. But I don't know when I'm going to get to it. Sorry. I have a lot of things planned. And that's why it's hard to be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that today. You know, those sorts of things is just hard to do. And I've been doing a lot more of these live streams, which of course take away from me actually producing content that you can learn from. Next question. I'm creating a custom Django authentication using a session variable. Is it a good idea? Well, the Django authentication, I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to put in the session variable, but sessions often have the actual authentication details, not all of the details, not the sensitive things inside of the session itself. So you can use the session to end a authenticated session altogether, right? Next question. Should I learn Django or Flask? Well, it really depends on the project that you're trying to build. If you want to build the hard way, as in you have a full-featured web application that has all sorts of things that needed to be involved, like user authentication, a database, and connecting those two things, database migrations. You can do all of this stuff in Flask for sure, but it doesn't come by default inside of Flask. There's a bunch of third-party packages that you have to learn, whereas Django has all of it in there by default. So you can absolutely, you know, just learn Django, so you have a lot of features built into what you are building with Django for very common web applications. Flask you can learn in a day or two. It doesn't actually take that long to learn basic Flask from Python, but then making full-fledged web applications like Django takes a little bit longer to use Flask. So I think Django is a great place to start, honestly. So one of the things that I'm thinking about doing, or well, I'm definitely going to be doing in some degree, but these are live boot camps, very similar to this, but really geared towards covering specific content over a duration of time. And I'm probably going to have some participants that I'm actually working on their specific projects. And I'm not quite sure yet if I'm going to live stream the whole thing to everyone, and then the like maybe 20 people actually reviewing their content as well. So I'm still playing around with that, but I will be announcing it soon for a live stream, which will do something very similar to this, talking all about it, my plans for it. So make sure you sign up on cfe.sh to get on our newsletter to hear about that. It'll probably be in a day or two. So even if you just subscribe on the channel, you'll probably see the live stream coming through too. So if you really want to get good at Django and you're kind of struggling, that's what that bootcamp is going to be for. And it's certainly not for everybody, because that it takes a lot of time to like really dive into somebody else's project and give them actionable advice, versus here I can answer questions generally, but I'm not looking at your code. I'm not actually analyzing the things that you're doing either right or wrong. so I can really point those things out. So I want to do a boot camp that allows me to do that on a much smaller basis than something like this. So yeah. Okay, next question. How can I start learning the Falcon framework? I'm actually not familiar with the Falcon framework, but I would imagine starting with their documentation is often a really good way to go, and also trying to build whatever the project is. What is the Falcon framework? Thanks for the question. Hey, thanks for the super chat. Appreciate it. It's 20 rupees. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. No question though, huh? Just a support. I appreciate it. Should I do those? I haven't looked too much into it, but I'm curious if you guys have had other YouTubers where you like kind of have a membership and you get little icons. Are those like worth it? Does anyone do that? Let me know. I really need to make a polling feature. So much like we've got these questions here, I want to have a way to send polls. And my idea was just to use a hashtag for some ID for the poll, and then you could give your answer right in the comments. And then my backend that's displaying these questions would essentially actually do the voting part of those things. That's something I definitely want to work on. That way we can have more polls, more interactive features to our live streams as well. If I use a headless CMS like Strapi, could I use another service like Firebase to handle user authentication? Yeah, Firebase, I believe you can handle user authentication for other applications. I'm not familiar with Strapi, so I don't actually have an answer there. If their authentication, if they have it, can change. But if it's open source, vast majority of things can change. Absolutely, like Django, you don't have to use Django authentication. I don't know why you wouldn't, but you don't have to. So that's something that's cool. Yeah. Open source is really cool because you can modify it to fit whatever it is that you want to do, right? Like that's, you just fork the code and make the changes you want to make. Now, in the long run, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. And if you're a beginner and you don't know what you're doing, I also wouldn't recommend this. But if you just want to learn and try a bunch of different things out, that's a really, really cool way to learn. I for sure think that you should try that if you haven't already. Next one, you were recommended by Dennis Ivy. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis, for the shout out. Dennis is a very active member of the YouTube programmer community. And he and I have chatted quite a few times. He's a good guy. He's working really hard. Definitely appreciate all of that. And I think you guys appreciate him too. I think, so for a really long time, I was like, oh, you know, I'm the Django guy. Like nobody should learn Django anywhere else. And that was unbelievably silly, because what's really much better is that more people learn Django. Who cares who learns it, right? So if we all know Django, it just rises the tide quite a bit. That's true with Python. That's true with pretty much everything that I teach. The more that we can help these people learn things, like you guys or anyone around the world learn these things, it benefits all of us, because it makes those things that much more valuable if a lot more of us know it and know it really, really well. So yeah, definitely check out Dennis Ivy. There's a lot of really good tutorials out there, which is awesome. I mean, it definitely makes me do a lot better job as well. Do I think Gatsby can be used with a site web app where the visible components lie somewhere around 50-50 static dynamic content? That's a good question. I haven't spent a lot of time with Gatsby, so I'm probably not the best person to ask about that. But thank you for the question. And sorry for the weak answer. How do I make a color detection app with React Native? What libraries do you need, and how do you do it? So color detection for what exactly? Like in an image, in a picture? I think there's probably a Python library that can summarize, and probably a JavaScript library too, that can summarize the main colors in any given image. I just don't know one off the top of my head. Already answered that one. Can I touch on the security of a Django application? Yeah, so when in doubt, use SSL, right? So there's a lot of free ways to get HTTPS or SSL or TLS in your Django application. That's one way, right? The other obvious thing is removing all of your passwords and credentials and secret key, removing that and adding it in as an environment variable, so your code itself doesn't have those things very easily accessible. Especially if you accidentally push your code into a public repository, then you don't have to like scramble to fix all of the keys that you have broken. Another idea is also having a secure cookie and implementing CORS policies. Those are a couple things that will help with security of a Django application. And of course, when you have user-generated content, associating that user-generated content directly to that specific user, so that there's not any accidental, like associated to that actual user using a foreign key, so there's no accidental lookups that aren't for that particular user. That's a little bit of a bug altogether. Cool. Thanks for the question. Let's see. How to get motivated. I hear this a good amount, actually. I'm kind of surprised because I think if you're on here, you're at least very interested. To me, motivation is fleeting, always fleeting, right? Like sometimes you're super motivated to get things done, sometimes you're not. Instead, what you should do is have a schedule and just promise yourself, this is my schedule, this is what I'm going to stick to. A good way to think about this is like, did you eat lunch today? Did you sleep last night? The question is probably yes, right? Depending on what time of the day. I haven't had lunch today yet, but I did eat breakfast, you know? So you have these things that you do on a regular basis, and if you start to actually schedule them and make them a part of your habits, then motivation doesn't matter. You just are always doing it. For example, let's say, for instance, you want to master some machine learning or deep learning specifically. This is a great book for that, right? So to me, what you would do is say, okay, I'm going to read for an hour and do as much as I can for an hour every Monday at 11 a.m. if you can, or maybe it's 9 p.m. or so, some point of the day, you do it for an hour, no matter what you're doing, you stop what you're doing and then go and do that. And if you do that all the time, your motivation won't matter as much. Instead, you'll continuously learn. Now, the other thing is like, think about if you were in primary school or like high school or even in college and you had to show up in class. Class has a specific schedule that you need to stick to actually go there. Whether you feel like it or not, class is happening. You need to kind of treat the things that you want to learn in a very similar way, right? Like I'm not always motivated to record or learn something new, but if I have a schedule where I'm like sticking to it, then it's a really good way to do it. A really cool thing, another book that's worth checking out along these lines is something called Atomic Habits by James Clear. He talks about these things as well, so that it kind of eliminates motivation as being one of the challenges that you may or may not have. Because if we only did things when we were motivated to do them, a lot of people wouldn't get much done. So another way to stick to what you intend to do is to publicly declare it. Like have it in front of a bunch of people that you need to show up for, like you need to actually do well for. That is something else that I highly recommend. So yeah, thanks for the question. How do I use Flask and React together? Well, Flask can just be an API that React consumes. It's really just that simple. Hey, how are you doing? Is it necessary to learn Flask or Django? Is that enough? Well, I don't actually think that only learning one thing is ever really enough. But if you don't know either one of those things, then just start with one, master it as much as possible, and then you can move to whatever's next, right? Because Django and Flask might be around in 5 years, but they also might not be. So really just learning how to master something, hopefully in a short amount of time, is a good idea. So I don't think that you should stop at Django and Flask. I think you can keep going. But the real question is like, what is it you're learning for, right? So if you're trying to build a project, then yeah, master one for your back end and then master another one for your front end and then keep going. And ideally you get a job of some kind, so you're working in that all the time. And then when you're ready to learn something new, you'll know when you're ready to learn something new. And it might be a little bit earlier than when you're quote unquote ready, but you can then move on to whatever's next in the list of things that you want to know. Thanks for the question. Hopefully that answers your question. All right. Really got to work on a way to hide these duplicates, because I get a lot of these duplicate questions. I mean, I really enjoy having a bunch of questions all together, but the challenge sometimes is people just copy and paste these questions over and over until hopefully I answer them. You know what I mean? Yeah. So next one, Python project idea for beginners. So do I have one? Yeah, I do. I have a few actually. Check out 30 Days of Python. There's a number of projects in there that you can absolutely do if you're a beginner. And that's on my YouTube channel. Cool. Big question. If you guys are watching this, are you subscribed to my channel? If not, how did you hear about this live stream right now? Like, what prompted you to join this live stream if you're not already subscribed and you haven't already seen some of my videos? I think some of the questions I get are for people who haven't really seen many of my videos, right? That's maybe true, maybe not. That's why I'm asking. Let me know. Definitely need to have a polling service on here. It'd be nice to have polls. All right. Next one, make a video in Django ORM. You mean just talking specifically about the ORM? Because in pretty much all of my videos, I use the ORM, which is like how you interact with Django and the database. So yeah, I definitely do that already. All right. Same question over and over. Let me just clear out some of these questions here. Give me a second, guys. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Thank you. What's that all about? Django and Flask is great, but how do we keep scale of users in mind, how to learn on the infrastructure side of things? So to go to DevOps is what you're referring to, I'm assuming. Because Django and Flask are the application layer of an entire system that might be in the back end of these things. So you're going to want to learn more about DevOps, whether that's Linux operating systems themselves and running your own web servers, or using something like Kubernetes and Docker. There's a lot of different things, a lot of different concepts that you would want to learn on the networking side of the web application. It's definitely outside the context of a lot of things that I cover, but I think his name's Network Chuck. He talks about a lot of those things on YouTube. I've found a number of his videos pretty helpful, so check that out if you want to learn more about behind Django, like the true back end of the network and how to scale up applications and stuff like that. It's not a trivial thing, but really, if you don't know Django and Flask well yet, the networking side might be incredibly interesting, but if you don't actually have the scale to develop for, don't worry about it until you get closer to having that many users, right? So like, why would you worry about scaling if you're not even close to it, right? Like if you have like a huge trajectory of users coming on, then of course you need to scramble and worry about it. But it's a lot easier to solve for that, because then you can find people who are really interested in solving that scale problem with you. You know what I mean? Thanks for the question. Do you practice any selected algorithms / programs in Python? Do I practice them? Yeah, not really. I'm not sure what it is exactly you're trying to ask me. Like, do I have some like that you can practice with? Not off the top of my head. There are a number on there. I think if you look on GitHub called The Algorithms for the Python one, you'll find some pretty cool stuff there. So yeah, make sure you check that out. Please make a video for Python with Jenkins automation. Thank you for the suggestion. It's funny how much I get asked this question: Node versus Django. Node is a runtime, right? So this is asking Python versus Node.js, really, because Django itself is a framework. It has a bunch of things built already on top of Python. So it's not a really good question. But every project has its own demands. So if you want to build something right off the bat and not have to take a lot of work, Django is the obvious choice there. Node.js is great for all sorts of things as well, but you would have to use something on top of Node.js to really give a full Django versus whatever the Node.js framework is that you'd be comparing. I definitely need to make a video talking about the difference between those two, because I just hear it so much. It's interesting. I'm kind of wondering where that's coming from. Is there like a university out there somewhere that actually talks about this a lot? Like, where is the origin of that comparison really coming from? Because it doesn't come up with like Django, and I don't ever see what's better, Django or PHP. Like, I never see that, but that's almost asking the exact same question. Anyways, oh yeah, just answer that one. This is a good one. Why is the secret key in Django so important? Well, the secret key, it works directly with the session itself. It's how the session is often generated. So you want to make sure that that is not shared, because then if it is shared, you can absolutely have your site hacked in some way, right? So you don't want to share that secret key. There's probably a number of other things that I'm not fully realizing on the secret key itself, but that's a good question. Thank you. Hey, is it possible to host Django app in Windows? Yes, it is. You'd probably have to use something like Waitress and not Gunicorn, which is what I use most of the time. Waitress as the web server gateway interface for Django. But as far as hosting web apps on Windows Server and stuff like that, it's not something I really am proficient at, so I can't give much more than running it through Waitress. I know that that would be the solution for it. Okay. This is a good question. I get this sometimes too. Do I work as a developer or do I teach others full time? Yes. So I work as a developer and a teacher. So in order for me to actually be able to teach anything, I have to be building projects in a lot of new things all the time. So the comments that you see right here, those comments are driven through the YouTube API in a project that I built, right? So I'm constantly building new projects all the time, and thus I am constantly developing things all the time. I don't know if I could really teach without constantly developing. Certainly I could teach the concepts or the conceptual things, but real practical, valuable things that are used in the world right now, I wouldn't be able to teach them if I'm not doing it all the time. And so a big part of my job is to do that research, right? So maybe a third, maybe even a half of the job that I have is to research and actually use a lot of these tools. I also find it very, very fascinating. So as far as how I actually earn a living, yes, it actually is through teaching. I don't freelance or work for a company for development itself. I just do all of those things as I see fit right now. And I try out a bunch of projects. That's the main thing here, right? I try out a bunch of projects that I either turn into a service, something like what you see here eventually will be a service that anyone can use. I have no idea how successful it will be, but I'm going to make it production ready and exactly what I would be doing if I was working as a developer anyway. Thanks for the question. That's a good one. Portfolio tips. Yes. What you'd want to do is actually have a complete project, like end to end done. Like if you stop in the middle, it's not really a full complete portfolio. And then actually giving instructions on how to pull that project and run it, right? Especially if it's for a portfolio for prospective hiring, right? You want to give as much of that as possible, and then also create unit tests. So unit tests are important because if somebody could pull your code, a lot of hiring managers or hiring engineers are probably going to test that code using unit tests in some form. So naturally, you'd want to have that in your README as well for every project. But the more projects you do, the better your portfolio will be, because you'll see a nice trajectory. And instead of, I mean, there's some debate to like how you improve these projects. Do you improve them on a single repository, like one project on a single repository, or do you create a new repository for a new version? That's going to depend on how hard you're working on these various projects and how often you are. So like if you have one project that's going to be your main portfolio and you're just going to crush it, right? You're going to make it so good. You can absolutely keep that in one repository. But if you have multiple versions of one, you'd have it in multiple repositories. Something like for me, it'd be like an e-commerce one, right? I would have an e-commerce one that's all in Django, and then I would do another e-commerce one. Maybe it's all in Django and React, and then so on. And you use that in your portfolio. That's at least how I would approach it. Do I have any new future Django projects coming soon? The answer to that is always yes. Like Django is something that I constantly am building more and more things for. So definitely make sure that you subscribe to check it out. Yeah, so thanks for coming out, guys. It really means a lot. It's pretty cool that I can jump on at any time and just get a ton of questions, right? Like that's so much fun. I really like that. And I can never keep up with the amount of questions. So maybe I need to make the answers shorter, but I don't want to. If I'm going to answer a question, I want to give it like the full due attention that many of these questions deserve. Anyways, next one. Thanks for reply. You're welcome, Programming Life. Thanks for coming back. Next up. How would you go about sharing user authentication across multiple domains so they don't have to create accounts for each domain? Can't use Google or Facebook auth. So you can build a REST API that allows you to have your users authenticate with one single project. That single authentication can be used across multiple domains for sure. So the authentication method you use for that, if you want something like Google or Facebook auth, you would use the OAuth 2 method for it. So OAuth 2 is how those things are authenticated, where you basically give approval for your service and their account to work on another service's account. So yeah, cool. Thanks for the question. It's a good one. What do I think about a multi-tenant architecture using Django series? This is really interesting because it's asked a good amount. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Django is the best method for managing a multi-tenant architecture, but maybe it'd be something worthwhile. I guess I'd need to know if more people want to see that. I only see this question every once in a while, so it's not something I've been spending a whole lot of time on. Thanks for the question. Next one. Can we see any asynchronous Django course on my channel or your website? Yes. So Django 3.1 has asynchronous views. It's amazing. Andrew Goodwin has a YouTube video. Just look it up. Andrew Goodwin's one of those core developers. This YouTube video that talks about all of their asynchronous plans. It's really exciting to see where Django's going. So I actually already have asynchronous Django, even though I didn't use 3.1 on it. Django Channels 2 allows for asynchronous Django. So I already do that, and I have a couple of different videos both on my website and on my YouTube channel. Thanks for the question. All right, next one. Which is the best JavaScript framework for Django? It really doesn't matter, right? So you could use React, you can use Angular, you can use Vue, you can use jQuery, you can use whatever comes out next. Right? There's plenty of other JavaScript frameworks. And that's also true for those JavaScript frameworks. Do they need Django? No, you just need to build a robust REST API and use a robust front-end framework, whatever that might be. So Django makes it really easy to build that robust REST API. And I think React.js, that's my preferred method to actually use that REST API. So that's what I prefer right now. But I used to prefer the Angular and Django side of things. And for some projects, I prefer Fast API and React, or Fast API and Vue, or Fast API and Angular, right? So it's not always Django. It just really depends on the project you're trying to work on. So hopefully that helps answer your question. What do I think about SAP or SAP? Is it a good career option as a developer? I don't have a whole lot of experience with this one, so I believe it's still incredibly popular. And as far as a career option, whatever you're mastering, anything in programming can be related to other things in programming. So even if it's old or it's no longer used anymore, Like PHP is somehow still popular, but it's not nearly as popular as some of these other growing ones like Python, Ruby on Rails, and maybe even C++. I feel like that's been growing a lot. Java. So a lot of the concepts overlap in every programming language. So whatever it ends up you end up learning technically will likely overlap to other things in the future. So if it's really popular, if people are hiring for it, then yeah, go ahead and do it. I think that's good. How do you prevent Django signals from getting executed twice? You can pass in. Geez, I'm going blank on this. If it's signals or celery, but I believe you can pass in an ID with your signal. I'm pretty sure you can pass in a unique ID for any given signal to make sure that it's not being executed more than once. So check the docs for that specifically, but I'm pretty sure you can in Django signals. I'm also pretty sure you can do that in Django and Celery integration. That's where I'm kind of confusing the two in my brain right now because I haven't needed to do this specific thing in a while. But I think you can probably do it in both, where you have this unique ID and you're triggering some sort of signal or some offloading task, depending on what it is you're doing. Thanks for the question. Same, back again, huh? Rewind a bit and hear what I talk about with that one. Can I teach us some data visualization using an API with business intelligence? Or do you have a specific business intelligence application that you're looking at with BI? Yeah, I actually have a chart.js series with Django. It's a very minor one, but it gives you the general idea how to do both things, like using Django or any REST API for that matter, and visualizing it in chart.js. I think there is a lot more that can be done there, and I appreciate the reminder of that. Like you saying this reminds me to spend a little bit more time there. And that's definitely something I need to do a lot more of, so thanks. You love my channel and I deserve more recognition. Thank you. I'm not doing this for the recognition, but I do appreciate the sentiment, right? Like I really just enjoy the challenge it is to constantly make better software, right? That's an amazing challenge, and I recommend it to anyone who's interested. And then teaching it actually makes me a lot better at actually building software because I have to be incredibly clear about it. The other part is I just really enjoy doing this. So, if I can keep doing it, if I get support from my viewers like I do, I already get a lot of support from viewers that really enjoy this content, to where whether it's these super chat things or actually being members on the site, all of that support actually helps me do all these things a lot more. So I don't actually need that many people to support it to be able to do it and benefit pretty much everyone. So, but thanks for watching. Thanks for the comment. I appreciate it. I'm sure at some point, things like to go in this direction as long as we are pushing them that way. So, maybe at some point we'll start seeing like something like this happen. But I need to be a lot more dedicated to building more content for YouTube. And it's actually fairly challenging to keep up with the demand. Just like these questions. It's a good example of this. I'm like 25 minutes behind on questions. This is not any different than the amount of videos that need to be made for all of these concepts related to these questions, right? So I could be spending all day, every day producing videos and eventually have just every video ever. But luckily, there's many other YouTube channels out there that are really good that you can learn from as well. So at the end of the day, you can still benefit a ton from what's out there on YouTube or people's channels if you really, or their websites if you really want to invest the time to make it happen. You know what I mean? Thanks for the question. What about Django with GraphQL? So GraphQL is a protocol. It's very similar to like REST API, where it's a different way to do requests to your backend. I think it's interesting. I haven't actually spent enough time with it, as with many things that I want to really master. I haven't spent enough time with it to be like, yes, I love GraphQL. I know there's a lot of people that have spent that time and do feel that way about it. I'm just not quite there yet. I think it's really interesting. Now, if you're not familiar with what GraphQL is and how it's different than a REST API, so REST APIs are typically static, like they don't change, right? So what you do is you actually do a request to a request API, or a REST API rather, a RESTful API that gives you a specific response. So if you have a bunch of posts, you do a request to the endpoint for all those posts. GraphQL is a bit different because all you do is a request to one endpoint all the time, and you say, oh, I want posts, and these are the ones I want, right? It makes a lot of sense. It's almost like a SQL lookup itself, but it's just a little bit different. So that's pretty cool. Good question. If you're interested in it more, I highly recommend that you just play around with some of the libraries that are on there for GraphQL. And it's probably something I need to cover at some point. You really like my channel and Network Chuck. Yeah, thank you so much. I just mentioned Network Chuck. I think he's got a lot of really good stuff. So thank you for the comment. Appreciate it. How do I develop a native, obviously native, but Android application with React Native? What libraries or API do you need? Can you guide me in detail? Yeah, so React Native is, first off, I would say learn React.js. You don't have to learn React.js to do well with React Native. But if you don't know React.js, it's a good place to start to then use React Native because React Native just uses different components in React.js essentially. So I would just learn that as much as possible. You need to use some sort of REST API. So even if you use something like, what would be a good one for just general information? Kind of go blank on what that would be, but basically you just need to have some sort of REST API in the backend and then building something on top of that using React. And then eventually you'll be able to turn that into an Android application. I do intend to cover React Native in the near future, hopefully sooner rather than later, but these things take time. So React.js would be my first step. I have a Try React series. That's an interesting one to start with. I do intend to have a new Try React series soon, but at least starting with React to just get your hands wet with that, and then moving into React Native will be incredibly easy, I think. Yeah. Is Django CMS good? I don't love Django CMS. I'd rather create my own. So if you're not using the Django admin, you might as well create your own views and handle all that stuff yourself. That's my opinion. Thanks for the question. Thank you for teaching Django to the world. Thank you for watching. Appreciate it. What's the best way to authenticate Django with React? The best way, well, if you saw my Tweet Me To project, what we use is the Django session and the CSRF token. That might be the most secure way. I'm having I get a number of comments related to JOT tokens, so JWT tokens as being not incredibly secure. So that's why in my Tweet Me To series, which is on my channel, you can see how to actually authenticate. So I would recommend that you watch that because I think I give a lot more detail on that there. Thanks for watching. More projects with React and Django. Yes, I agree. We should do more. And we will. Cool. Next one. Thanks for replying just on the reason I asked. I'm in London, UK, where I'm from. Python jobs 99% require a CS degrees. But I kind of switched to React, but Django is still doable. That's interesting that Python jobs require CS degrees. The job listing might say that, but then when it gets down to it, it might not matter at all. So I think if it does matter, maybe that's not necessarily a job you want to work at because that's severely limiting the things that you can do. Like you should be working for companies that are like, hey, we just want to know that you can do these things, not that you have some arbitrary degree given by someone. If you can do it, I think you want to work for a company for that specifically. You know what I mean? Anyways. Changed my life during college. Thank you so much. You started this channel when you were learning Django and the Try Django 1.8 series. Yeah. That is throwing it back. Thanks for mentioning that. Are you working as a Django developer now? That's a curious thing because that was what, 5-6 years ago, something like that. Oh wow, when I started the channel, that might have been about 7 years ago now, huh? Yeah, thanks for watching, appreciate it. Next one. Can you please keep these live videos on the channel? Yes, once I actually solve the challenge that I've been working on, which is when a question's asked, I want to actually turn that into a clip. So that's what I'm working on. And then the major clip is probably going to be edited up a little bit too, to where it's just going off of these questions and it kind of jumps around. So it's not just this one long live video. Yeah, I mean, what do you guys think about that? Do you want to see more of these live videos on the channel later? I wanted to make them better than they are, because like I think it's kind of hard to watch an hour long video that's a live Q&A if you're not actually on the live Q&A, or you just don't jump in and hear a few things. Just let me know. This is another reason I need to have some sort of voting feature on here, so I can actually see these results from your comments or whatever. Do you guys know of a good way to do polls on live streams? Please let me know. I would love to check it out. How to debug in Django. For this one, I would say the Django debug toolbar. That's a really easy way to do it. Also, writing Python requests. Writing Python tests using unit tests to actually run through and make sure it's all running correctly. Django with Mango or Flask with MongoDB. Django with Mango. Mango, is that a binding for Django or Python to MongoDB? So I haven't seen Mango. Geez, why am I saying that weird? If you want a NoSQL database, MongoDB is probably the best one right now. I have a new blog post related to integrating Django with MongoDB using something called Django. It's really not that hard to do. Django makes it really easy. Maybe at some point Django will have native support for that. So hopefully that answers your question. Programming Life, thank you for all of your questions and showing up like you do. Thank you for all of you who show up more than once. And I really appreciate it. Now, if you have a question, because I'm definitely not going to get to every question, right? So like I'm still 30 minutes behind on the questions. If you have a question that I haven't answered, just shoot it in the, oops, that's not what I meant to do, but shoot it in a super chat, even if it's $1, whatever it is, the super chats go right to the top and I answer those as soon as I can. So how do we make private media directory in Django? So how do you like password protect uploaded files? I'm assuming is what you mean. So you can use AWS S3 to do this and essentially just not make that part of the bucket public, right? So the things that you need public are your static files and maybe other media uploaded files like a profile picture, for example. But if you need password protected things, then you just have another bucket or another part of that same bucket that is not open to the public. And then every time you need to download something from that bucket, you need to run a signing key for that. I cover all of that in my dive into AWS course, specifically that. I think that's a really interesting thing that needs to be done. But what I just said is just the gist of what you need to do. Thanks for asking. How do you make your Flask web app production ready? There's a number of things to discuss here. One of them, introducing cores, making sure you have a cores policy of some kind so you're not getting request forgery. I think you have, if I remember correctly, that you can add CSRF tokens into Flask as well. That's definitely another thing. Removing all of your secret keys. Any sort of key or password that is written in your Python code, you need to move that into an environment variable. You're definitely going to want to have HTTP or TLS or SSL activated as well. That's pretty much it as far as an overview is concerned. Next one. Your advice for someone starting a big Django project. Big in the sense of both scalability and number of features. Yeah, so the question is, to me, if you're starting a big project, how much of that project can you use other services for, right? Can you actually build a REST API that's calling some of these other services so you can rely on those other services initially, right? So you shouldn't come out the gates and build as big as a project as possible, because anything that's taking longer from getting into the hands of real users is taking too long, right? If the design is long, or if the schedule is long, the design is wrong. Just think of it in that terms, right? So you want to get this out as soon as possible, in my opinion. So the number of features, there's so many things out there that you can offload to other services, And even if you don't know of the integration for that service, you can use something like Zapier, which is like a no-code solution. But Zapier can allow you to quickly prototype things or features for any given application, right? So, or you can use something like Flask to build microservices for various pieces of your Django application as well before you actually need to integrate it into Django. That would be the first step, I would say, is breaking apart these features into smaller chunks and using services for the chunks that you really don't need to build yourself right now. The next thing is scalability. To me, there's no better way to do this right now than Kubernetes. Kubernetes will handle this for you. So you make a Dockered version of your Django application, you deploy it to a Kubernetes cluster, and you have a number of nodes that are running your application in that Kubernetes cluster. Cool thing about this too is then you can easily add other microservices onto your Django project, and Kubernetes will, if your server goes down or if one of the nodes go down, one of the Django nodes for some reason goes down, Kubernetes will automatically patch it and thus make it ready or closer to ready for real scalability. With that, that also would mean that you have something like a cloud SQL server of some kind. So Google Cloud Run is a good, or Google Cloud SQL is a good example of that, or AWS's MySQL RDMS database, if I remember correctly. Having like a scalable backend SQL database is really good for those Django projects. And then offloading things using Redis. So using Redis and Celery to offload as much of the worker needed processes that you can do. And then in addition to that, using caching as much as possible. That will also help your scalability. And then finally, using a content delivery network. I think there's a lot of other things that we could probably talk about there, but I didn't want to get too much in the weeds there. I think that overview should help you at least get started on that big Django project. Next one, you have a dockerized Django project and a separate React front end. What are the ways to deploy it? So deploy Docker, you can deploy it on Heroku. If you don't need a Python runtime running all the time, you can use Google Cloud Run, which is a serverless option that's incredibly inexpensive to run a Django project from, especially a Dockerized one or a Docker Django project. And then your separate React front end, well, you can use either Google Cloud Storage or AWS S3 to put your React front end there, and then having Django actually loading those things up on the templates and stuff like that. So Django storages might be your good friend there. Thanks for the question. That's a good one. Let's see. And oh no, looks like I'm not getting some of the latest questions on. Dang. Okay. So my little comments have went away, but Michael Jarvis, thank you for the super chat. Stream polls. I don't think you can post links in a super chat, but look up strawpoll.me. Cool. I will check that out. Yeah. So I don't think you can post links either. So my idea was maybe you just put a hashtag, and let's even try that. So I'll just say ABC123 and then something like A, like the actual thing that you're voting. So if you see on the live chat right now, I just added hashtag ABCA. So the hashtag and then that key there would actually relate to the poll that's on screen at that time. And then A would be your choice, right? So perhaps that would be a good way to do it. And I would actually have to just build in the backend logic that parses these live chat questions and then just essentially go from there. So perhaps that's something I can do on this little project I'm working on to make these live chats a lot more interactive. I think at some point in the future, they will be incredibly interactive and just incredibly effective. Because the thing is, I get a lot of the same questions over and over again. Here we go. There, got it back up. Hopefully. Nope, it is not back up. Okay, so I get a lot of the same questions over and over again, and I want to solve that problem. And I think adding polls and adding some additional processing to these live chats after they happen is going to be really beneficial for everyone that shows up to them, but then also for everyone who does not show up to them. So the long run, some of these questions I get over and over again, I can just be like, hey, watch this one segment. That one has the most views or something like that, or the most likes related to the question that you're asking. And then maybe even having a chatbot that automatically responds to it. So I'm actually curious, did you actually see that that response that I gave, the hashtag ABC1231? Did you actually see that one, Michael? Let me know. Okay, cool. So let's see here. Thanks for the question. I just need to do something real fast. Thanks for bearing with me, you guys. Yeah. Okay, so that is unfortunately my API keys time out because I don't have a official YouTube API application that's actually running this. I mean, it's really close, but it's not quite ready there, you know? So here's a question: to update a nested object in Redux, do we use filter or map? Well, it really depends on what it is, what exactly you're trying to do, because both of those things work really well, but I don't know what you're trying to do with it specifically. So update a nested object. Oh, just the nested object you want to update. I think map is probably the best solution for that. I'm actually curious to find that out. That's a good question. I don't think about that a whole lot. So I also don't use Redux. So that's another thing, is I don't really use it very much. That question again. Here we go. How do you decide which business ideas to pursue? For me, it's scratching my own itch, right? So that's initially how I start, with the assumption that scratching my own itch, or I mean, solving a problem that I have, a real problem that I have, I think that will work for other people. So a good example of this is, you know, these comments right here. And at some point, maybe I'll have a poll thing up here. But the idea is, hey, I needed a way to be more interactive with you guys. And I wanted it even better than what I've got currently. It's nice to be able to answer these questions, but what if I could say, hey, the first 20 people that get on here, I can hook you up with something, and there's like a way to automatically do that. That would be really nice. So that's a nice feature that I want to have. So to me, it's like there's all these features I want to solve for with these live chats. Now, I also know that there's a number of people that do live chats, so maybe there's a good option to actually turn this into a business, but maybe not. So I won't actually know until I have a working prototype for that customer base, right? So to me, it's much better to have an idea that solves a problem, a pre-existing problem that maybe many people already have, right? So I'm actually not positive if that's going to work out in my case, because if this problem already exists for me and I haven't been streaming that long, it certainly exists for other people that have streamed for a while. So maybe that problem's already solved. I just haven't been able to find exactly the solution I want. And perhaps the solution I want is a little bit too narrow in scope. Like maybe I'm the only one that really, really wants that versus the ones that other people might want, right? So really it's finding a market, finding a problem that a lot of people have to solve and trying to solve that. But then like essentially just going after that idea before you even build anything. So making something like an MVP landing page, which I have a whole video on how to make. You make an MVP landing page and do a little promotional video and see if you get a lot of interest. Because if you do, then you'll actually be able to start maybe getting some traction to actually solve that problem. I'm actually going to talk about this more as it relates to these comments in the near future. So keep an eye out for that on my channel on how to like pick what project to work on. Josh McDonald. Are these recorded? No, they are not, Josh. It just takes a while to get to all of these questions. You know what I mean? But thanks for the question. Let's see here. All right, so I'm going to try and go to something a little bit newer. March of the Titans, welcome back. Do I have any recommendations for creating a REST API in Python? Any module recommendations? So right now, if you just need a REST API to run some sort of Python script, Fast API is the way to go to me, right? If you need full-on backend, full-on authentication, perhaps Fast API is your solution, but that will take a little bit longer. So then in that case, I would use Django. So hopefully that helps answer your question. But Fast API, as soon as you return a dictionary that actually is converted into a JSON object, so then your REST API is a JSON REST API. That's JavaScript object notation, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. So Fast API does that by default. So it's already an API when you actually create any given endpoint. So it's sort of like an API first framework. And this comes to the next one. Will I cover a full stack project or application built with Fast API? Yes, this is something I want to do. There's so many things I want to do. This is definitely one of them. I think Fast API is really interesting for a lot of reasons, but being that you can get an API up going quickly is great, especially for machine learning projects. So yeah. How do you deploy multiple mode WSGI Django apps on the same application? I'm using Apache. How to declare multiple static aliases pointing to different folders. Wow, I haven't worked with Apache in a while, so I don't have a great answer for you on this one. Sorry about that. Let's see here. Microservice architecture all done by Python. That's what the internet needs. Yeah, perhaps. When you say all done by Python, maybe also having Kubernetes in there, because Kubernetes simplifies the microservice architecture a lot. Next one. You love 30 days of Python. Thanks so much. What should I do for day 30? I've only done 29 days so far, so let me know. Let's go a little bit faster because I'm not going to be on here that much longer. Can you please make a video to store secret keys in Django using HashiCorp Vault? Interesting. I haven't actually heard of HashiCorp Vault. I'll put this in my notes. Thank you for that. And thanks to you and all YouTubers, I started coding from scratch in this lockdown and got a job. Hey, congratulations. That's awesome. I mean, that's like when did you start? In April or March or earlier than that, depending on where you are. Be really interested to see how many people have done this as well. I think it's like such a good time. I mean, it's like such a challenging time for so many of us, right? But it's such a good time to be like, okay, now, given that we have no control over what actually happens in our life, right? We like to think that we do, but then COVID comes along and then shows us that, yeah, maybe we don't because these lockdowns happen. So then it's better to work on stuff that you're really interested in, right? So it's really cool to see this. Hopefully coding and building applications and stuff like that is something you were interested in. And this lockdown actually just gave you the extra motivation to make it happen. Yeah. What are the best projects that you've made? Let's say, well, Coding for Entrepreneurs clearly is my current best, right? It does the best. I have the most traction with it. I've seen a number of people as a result of it using what I teach and all that. But the projects that I'm really excited about, one of them is Tide AI. There's a lot of things that I am like super proud of myself for building for Tide AI. Most of those things are not public at this point. But like getting up to that was like just so rewarding. So public projects, Coding for Entrepreneurs for sure. My e-commerce courses over the years have gotten a lot better. Those ones I think are among my best. And then, you know, other series and projects that I'm really excited about too is this one right here for these comments, right? And then eventually polls somewhere around here. Those things I'm really excited about. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? Best, I think, is relative, right? So even if it's the best right now, over time it's not going to be the best. So I just like focusing on building better and better projects. And Coding for Entrepreneurs is something that I've always improved on. So it's getting better and better. So it's kind of like my juggernaut of a project. It's better than everything that I've ever done. But I do want to continuously improve that and that's what makes it better than everything that I've ever done. Thanks for asking. That's, of course, my website, codingforentrepreneurs.com, right? Or cfe.sh. And, you know, here are a couple of links that you might want to check out too. So if you follow me on Twitter and on YouTube, this will ask you to subscribe, or just cfe.sh. That's another place as well. Thanks for asking. Thanks for the questions, guys. Is it necessary to create a wait db ready command when you're using Docker, Django, and PostgreSQL? That's a good question. I think that Django actually handles the waiting for the database being ready. That is something I would have to check. It's a good question. I need to make a note of that to look it up. This is very specific to how the databases work. Love it. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. I already saw that one. Let's see. Projects with Django and Vue, maybe eventually. I'm really on React right now, so I need to do more with that before I end up going the Vue route, but it's definitely something that I want to do. Thank you. Hey, from Pakistan. Welcome. Hey, I'm stuck on my Django project. I'm not sure what to do with that. Thank you for the comment, though. How can I change a value from an empty database? I need to specify if the user want to make the blog craft. I'm not sure what you mean by this. You create Django, if you're talking about in Django, you create Django models specifically to how you want your database to be rendered. That's the best I can do there. Or database to be structured, rather. Do you think that Django should subdivide the framework into different pieces? I mean, the ORM, the views. No, I do not. Django is like a symphony, all working interminglingly a lot. If you want them in different pieces, Django developers already know of Flask and Fast API and all these other things that will continue to do that. So yeah, no, I don't think Django should ever do that. I think it should stick the way it is. Just improve things for speed and for reliability and security, which is what they do. That's like pretty much all they do. Cool. Already answered that one. Is Redux used in big Django React projects? Yes, Redux can be used in those big Django React projects. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be, but it definitely is oftentimes. It really depends on who the React developer is and their preferred method of storing the state objects, essentially. What's the sitemap in Django? What's its real-time use? A sitemap is really useful for doing SEO stuff. So it's a way to just show the structure of the entire site. Can I do a playlist on in-depth tutorials of data structure and algorithms? Yeah, that must be a course that's commonly used for a lot of people. Thanks for the suggestion. Appreciate it. Can I do a Django REST framework Redis Celer project? Yes, that is a good suggestion. And I am working on time and tasks 2 on my website, which will have elements of each one of these things. Definitely Django, Redis, and Celery. I already have a number of things on my website right now for those, including free blog posts. So check that out if you're interested. How to add video and play it in a Django project. So like having Django actually manage playing the video. I'm not exactly sure how you would execute this in a web application, but in a local application, you could probably use Django and something like FFmpeg or MoviePy to actually play videos locally using Django, although that probably isn't the best method to do it, but you definitely could. If you're using it in a web application like Django, because that's what Django's for, is for web applications, you can use like video.js to actually play the video. That's a free way to do it, and just having Django having a static server serving the video, and then Django serving the actual view that the static server is working with, the JavaScript and all that. Hopefully that answers your question. Really trying to get through a lot more of these a lot more quickly, at least at this point. I'd like to know some of the use cases of Django asynchronous. So asynchronous views actually doing asynchronous code, well, a good example is what I cover with asynchronous is web scraping. So let's say, for instance, you want to use Django to actually manage your web scraping events, right? You use some sort of scheduler within Django, probably Celery, and you want to actually do all these different web scraping things. Or you want your users to be able to use Django for web scraping. Now, traditional web scraping isn't necessarily asynchronous, like it's not doing a bunch of web scraping at once. Using Django async, you can web scrape, let's say 100 different websites at one time with one single view. Roughly at one time, it does switch back and forth. That to me is like doing asynchronous web scraping is a good example of something you could do with Django async. Another option would be to actually using third-party APIs. So having Django calling the third-party API, but not necessarily making the user wait for that to happen, using async instead. So basically offloading it from the main request response cycle. Hopefully that makes sense. It probably does for some of you. For some of you, probably did not. Thanks, Michael. I'm glad you saw that. See if that's going to be a good polling option. We'll see. How many requests can Django handle per day, maybe? This is all going to depend on the server or service that you're deployed on, like what your actual system is. So that's a hard thing to answer with that vagueness. You know what I mean? Do I really think that Django 3.2 will be full asynchronous capable? Actually, no, I do not. If you take a look at Andrew Goodwin's talk that I mentioned earlier, he did it like a week or two ago. He talks all about Django's future async stuff, and it's really interesting, so check that out. Is it possible to scrape SofaScore? They have a system for detecting scrapers. I don't know what SofaScore is. So, I mean, yeah, it's possible to scrape things. You can scrape anything on the internet, but if you do it irresponsibly, then yeah, you're going to get blocked, right? That's the thing. So to do it where you're taking some time, I actually cover this in the Instagram version. I didn't actually scrape anything. I just automated tasks. So in 30 days of Python, I use Selenium to do automated tasks on Instagram. And you can absolutely use that for web scraping other places that have these detectors. So you want to just think in terms of like, yeah, if you're going to scrape a web page and it takes half of a second to scrape the entire page and then maybe 3 other pages too, they're going to notice that, right? So you want to avoid doing stuff like that. What do I recommend for using React store management? All of those are really good options. React Context is also great. I really like using React Context that's built into React. That's been my preferred method. Redux is incredibly popular. I haven't used Apollo Boost, but I've heard good things. Thanks for asking. Cool, you're waiting for that. I don't remember what that is, but thanks for asking. Oh, this is a good question. Uh-oh. Looks like our questions are down. Give me 1 second. Let's see what's going on here. There we go. What does a microservice mean in Python? So what is a microservice altogether is really the question. So with applications, you can start to get them really, really big, right? So let's think of like Django. Django tends to start to get towards what's called a monolith, a really, really big application with a lot of features built into it. So what happens when you build these big applications, if you mess up one little feature, it might break the entire application, which is not great, right? You don't want to use something that is going to break every time your users are using it or have the potential of that. So a way to solve this is to break up these big applications into smaller pieces or microservices, right? So the Django example, you could, in theory, break off authentication into another service where you now have 2 services where you used to have 1, or you could break off how you actually process videos into another service, like videos that are uploaded by your users. This is probably what you would actually end up doing, is using another service. And if you control that service, it's often referred to as a microservice. It's just a small service that's being run. Now, microservices don't have to be web applications themselves. They could just be living on a different server. Something like Kubernetes does this really well, but living on a different server in your virtual private cloud or your VPC, that way your main application can call that other server, like an actual other server, to run various smaller tasks that build up the whole. Or essentially you can turn in something like Django into a bunch of tiny little microservices that build up to build one major service. That's essentially what it means. Hopefully that answers your question. Thank you for that one. I already answered that one. How to always keep track of yourself, keep yourself in track of coding numbers. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Do you recommend to serve multiple Django projects from the same domain? Oh yeah, you already asked that one too. It's 1 a.m. Thanks for being out here. Appreciate it. Please try NUXT.js. It's a framework of a framework, Vue.js. Interesting. I'll have to check that out. What's the difference between Kubernetes and Docker? It's a good question. So Docker itself is for containers. If you're not familiar with containers, just think of it in terms of like a virtual operating system that you can just write one document to create that operating system, right? So like if you're trying to deploy Django on a Linux system, for example, there's a lot of things that you need to install on that Linux system for Django to run. Docker makes it really easy. You just make one file that is all of those things that you're going to run to install. And then the final thing would be how to actually run the Django project itself, which, there's a lot more complexity in that. If you want to know more about that specifically, I have a couple videos on Docker and Django. Kubernetes manages these containers, right? So you might have 1,000 different containers for a really big project. Now, you and me, we might only have 3 containers, right? Or 1 container even. Container being our Django application, for example. Kubernetes can have a bunch of different, these containers on a bunch of different servers so that it's really stable if some of these things go down, if some of these servers go down, because that's a very often thing that happens. So Kubernetes actually manages Django containers. There is a way to manage Kubernetes manages Docker containers. There is a way to manage Docker containers. There's other ways, one of them calling Docker Swarm, but Kubernetes is really the most popular way to do it now. It doesn't only manage Docker containers, but that's like its core functionality is to manage Docker containers to make sure that they're always healthy, or if they're not healthy, they become healthy because Kubernetes is monitoring them. So that's it's pretty cool. Kubernetes is definitely a popular thing in general. So it looks like a data structures and algorithms course, another request. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. You'd love to see React hooks from me. Thank you. I intend to do that in the next version of Try React whenever that comes out. I think I do hooks in the Tweet Me 2 project. I'm actually not sure. I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure I did hooks in there. Let me know if that's not the case, and maybe I'll have to come back to it. All right, so I'm only going to do a few more minutes. So if you have any pressing questions, please get them in now. So these live Q&As are a lot of fun. I really appreciate you guys coming out. Wow, I didn't even realize I've been on here for an hour and 20 minutes. It's been a while. Cool. Oh, I did hooks. Thank you, Priyanash. And there will be videos on Django Sync. Yes, that's correct. Web scraping, is it legal? Yes, web scraping is legal. This has been declared in the United States at least. But like that doesn't mean that you won't be banned from their service, because they have every right to do that. But there were some major things that happened, I think, with LinkedIn that made web scraping legal. Can I do a series on Frap? I haven't seen Frap. Sorry, the questions are not showing up on purpose. I'm just kind of rattling off the most recent ones. Frap, is that a Python application or what? Let me know. Priya Nash, thank you for the nice comment. Appreciate it. Okay, so I think that's going to be it, guys. Thanks so much for coming out to this live stream, asking a ton of great questions like usual. I really appreciate it. This is a lot of fun, and make sure you subscribe for future ones. And if you're really interested in that bootcamp, I'm going to be talking about it live very, very soon. So, yeah. All right, guys.